thanks. Rob Weiner is Associate Humanities Librarian over at the Texas Tech University Library, film historian, pop culture guru, and several other things that I'm sure I can come up with. And I've had the good fortune of being able to collaborate with him on a few projects lately, so I'm happy to have him here.
Thank you.
As I said before, my name is Rob Peaslee. I teach in the Department of Electronic Media and Communication, predominantly courses related to film and visual culture. And generally, we start these by offering a few comments on the part of each of the panelists, and then basically opening it up for discussion. And I'm sorry for those of you over there. I didn't hear. But I'd like to defer, if I could, to my guest and let you go first.
Okay, I only have a few comments to make about the film. There are a number of things that I see going on within the film. Number one, you see just how cruel humanity is, how cruel we are to one another, and yet despite that, you have this sort of band of misfits that come together and become friends, and you have this... I think ultimately the film is about friendship and loyalty and how that becomes very important in one's life, even though you could debate whether any of the characters have very many redeeming qualities or not. The other thing that strikes me about this film, having seen it several times now, is the city of Beijing itself. It's almost like a minor character, or minor/major character within the film. It's always there lurking if you pay attention to the cinematography and the way that the city is framed. It's always there in some way. And I think that when there's a line in there about the people disappearing within the city and things like that happening, and so I think that part of it makes this film a little more potent in showing the cityscapes and the beauty that's underneath that, as well as the darkness and despair.
Great, thanks. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think the city certainly is a character. I mean, it's probably not surprising. It's there in the name, Beijing Flickers, but very much so, more than a backdrop, I think. It really is, in a way, sort of a labyrinth or something that these characters have to navigate their way through, literally and metaphorically. I'm curious, how many of you, or does anybody here, have you visited Beijing, or do you come from the region? Okay. So, if you don't mind, I'd be curious to hear either of your responses to this, having been in the city.
I was only there for about 2 days. I went just before the Olympics.
Just before the Olympics, okay.
So I was like, hey, let's go to Beijing before the Olympics starts. Honestly, we were only there every day. And I would say, after the bus ride, it was just dingy, to be honest. It's almost like a masquerade. Everybody puts on their business vest and play a good night. Everything goes from what we can.
Meaning that it's quiet at night?
No. At night, everything goes is in like 5%.
Okay.
Everybody's pretty much all they're doing all day. Then where we were specifically at night, you could hear walls breaking, a few vehicles screeching around, people going. I was sure the city pretty great. That was
Interesting. Any other reflections?
I was really young when I was there. I was in like 7th grade, I think.
Okay.
I was there for a student. And yeah, so I don't really remember that much. I was pretty young, but it's a pretty beautiful city. We went to the Great Wall.
That would have been 10 years ago?
Yeah,
12 years ago, something like that?
Yeah.
Well, the reason I ask is because Beijing, obviously, with the Olympics in 2008, underwent a pretty significant facelift. And of course, Beijing, with the turn to the west on the part of China, really from the late 70s onward, has been increasingly, along with Shanghai, but really predominantly Beijing, has been increasingly commodified. After the years of the the rise of the Chinese Communist Party, the Cultural Revolution, which was a very dark time in most histories of the country. When you get that turn to the west, Beijing starts to westernize, modernize slowly. But with the onset of really the late 1880s, 1990s, you really start to see that accelerate. And with the Olympics, you sort of get this culmination of that process where Beijing suddenly throws open its window and says, "Here we are, we're westernized, we're modern, we're amazing, come check us out." And a lot of the rubble and construction that you see in the film here, I think, is meant to evoke a lot of the construction, the forced removals that were done leading up to the Olympics of people predominantly from the villages, from the outlying, which of course is the vast, vast majority of the population, from those outlying areas who sort of immigrated to the city. And it is sort of like an emigration. I mean, you do get a sense that this is sort of an immigrant's tale. Into the city, seeking work, leaving behind agrarian lifestyles, farming lifestyles. And it's predominantly those people that are moved forcibly by the central government in order to build things like the Bird's Nest and the Aquatic Center and those other structures that everybody was so impressed with during the Olympics. So there's a real sense in this film, I think, that the Chinese character in many ways is struggling with this process of westernization, of the importation of capitalism into an otherwise authoritarian one-party state. There's vast, vast disparities, more so than here. We have pretty vast disparities between our rich and poor, but vast disparities in China. And of course, there was news recently where the former premier was discovered to have had $2 billion some odd dollars stashed away in family accounts somewhere, which, if you're a communist country, is frowned upon in your leadership. But it's sort of a fact of the elite in China. I just say a couple things about the filmmaker. This is his 11th film, which is actually quite a lot for a global lens film. Generally, these are first-time, second-time, maybe third-time filmmakers. I think it shows. I think the production value is pretty solid here. As you said, the cinematography is gorgeous. And I think the writing is pretty advanced.
The acting was good, too.
I think the acting was excellent.
Yeah.
But this is a filmmaker who is labeled or thought of as part of the so-called sixth generation of Chinese filmmakers. The fifth generation were the first to go to film school after the Cultural Revolution, and they came out and started making films. And a couple of those people are probably recognizable to Western audiences, predominantly Zhang Yimou, who did a number of films, but is probably most well known for his later films like Hero and House of Flying Daggers. But his earlier films, and much of the fifth generation, are films that deal with much more everyday, sort of almost documentary-style stories. And they are stories that react against the strict control over filmmaking that took place during the Cultural Revolution immediately thereafter. And those filmmakers did really well in festivals overseas, but most of their films were not shown in China. Most of them were banned in China because of their political overtones. And then the sixth generation, of whom this filmmaker is one, come up in the 1990s and tend to and began as a very low budget, micro budget, like $10,000 and less budget film production strategies, and they would do, and a lot of this had to do with the onset of digital video. I think 16mm film was big. So it's interesting that this filmmaker comes up in that tradition by necessity, but also sort of as kind of a political stance. being outside the mainstream, outside of government control. This is clearly a film that's got, I think, a reasonable budget to it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Steadicam, it's color corrected, the soundtrack, the post-production's flawless, more or less. The actors are great. And it's got the government seal of approval on it at the beginning. And that relationship between the state and the artist in China is an interesting one. And just as a final little footnote, Zhang Yimou, who I mentioned as a filmmaker who's part of that fifth generation, many of his films were banned in China, his early films. Well, he was the one that produced the opening ceremonies for the 2008 Beijing Games. So he's got a very cozy relationship with the state. So just an interesting side note, but that says something about the relationship between the film industry and the state in a one-party autocratic society. So I think that's enough talk. I'm interested in your thoughts, questions, things that struck you about the film, confused you. Yeah, Dee.
So what do you think about the main actor? Like, he hasn't talked for is it a year? No, half a year. Is it right?
The main character?
Yeah, the main character.
What does he say, 127?
127. So what do you think about that?
It's about 4 months,
yeah. So what do you think about that? And then after that, the first word he said out after a few months of not talking is me, my son, my child, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So what
his
you think?
first word is me.
Yeah, me.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that we more or less meet him with for the first third of the film with his mouth covered. Right. I think that's a pretty clear symbol there for how artists feel in this society by and large, and of course, again, it's the film that's approved. Whether it's got an audience in China is a question I don't know the answer to. Occasionally these films from China get the sort of seal of approval for export so that they do well at festivals and reflect well upon China and the artistic community, but at the same time the films aren't permitted to be shown in the country. And I don't know if that's the case with this one, but certainly, yeah. I think that there's something going on there that the filmmaker wants to say about freedom of speech, individuality, and also kind of the ambivalence that maybe a lot of Chinese feel about individuality, considering that's the underpinning for capitalism, which is really the thing that is driving this crazy inequality between people. So I think there's a lot of ambivalence about this turn to capitalism, to the West, at the same time that people are interested in individuality and the things that capitalism can provide in that way. It's a hugely interesting place.
So then, do you think that they are all detached from the space?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Are they then detached from the space?
Who's that?
The group on the group of friends, or the ones that became friends.
Are they detached from the social space?
Right, or even the actual city?
I think in some sense it goes both ways. They're detached from the mainstream, but they're also part of the city uniquely, and the city is part of them. But as you were mentioning, the sort of immigrant, with the two friends who grew up together, and the drag queen, we really don't know the whole story behind the singer and where she fits in. That opening scene where he punches the guy and says, "Well, Beijing native would never have done this."
Barbarian.
Yeah, barbarian.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and of course the unseen in this film that haunts it throughout is the country, the countryside, the rural.
Yeah.
All of them talk about back home. And one, that one Sun Mo, or Sumo, goes back, and it's like, think about the look on their face when she realizes she's going back there forever. It's it's almost like a death sentence, right? It's not like, oh, sweet, have fun. It's like, wow, you're going back there, and it says something about the difference between those contexts.
One thing that bothered me, and I'd like to know your take on this, that man, raped her or whatever, you saw him playing with his family, and I thought, that bugged me. It's like, oh, now he gets to be normal again, but he's like evil to the core.
The boyfriend who gave her to the guy. Yeah. Well, I think that's probably accurate. I thought the film actually ended in a more positive way than I expected it to. I sort of thought everybody would like kill themselves, and it would just go to a black screen and that would be it. There was a certain amount of hope there in a weird kind of way,
especially with the dog.
Yeah,
that's my favorite scene in the whole movie when it's the dog.
When you're talking about her going back to where she came from in the script, it said she thought she deserved it. So she probably also thought, well, I deserve to go back. I don't belong here, and so I deserve
banishment.
Yes,
or whatever. Right? I mean, clearly the lesser alternative of the two, and yet here they are in this environment that I think they actually use the term like beats you down constantly.
And yet, through their friendship, they're able to hold on to, despite their despair, some kind of optimism, I think, is underneath it through friendship and loyalty. Especially when they go off in the water.
Yeah, beautiful scene.
I really like your thoughts on how Beijing acts as a character in the film. I thought a lot of that was reflected in the scenes during the darker times. A lot of scenes with the camera really peering through a really, at one scene, it was a really small rectangular window. The sea was literally closing in on the characters. And towards the end, they drive out towards the beach and there's the open skies.
How refreshing is that?
Looking through the bubble. Blue skies and that really kind of see for the first time.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Because really, it is it's either night or you're inside for much of the film. So it does have a very claustrophobic feeling.
And it wouldn't surprise me if the director had seen a number of American film noir movies where the city is integral to plot and storyline, shadows, and it's just. That's what I was thinking throughout the whole film, is that even though it doesn't really have a noir feel to it, I can certainly see an influence there from those films of the 40s and 50s. Maybe see osmosis.
I think it's hard about the first time being able to going back to his his son. The fact that he said that and compared it to a prison, you think that you see on news people get out of prison, you're like, why that guy? He shot this person and he should stay in prison forever. But he got out in 5 years. So it kind of shows that somewhere that things happen and some people get stuck in that situation.
Yeah, and particularly that it's not, sometimes it's just luck or sometimes it's just circumstance, but in this case it's about power. This is a guy who's connected. He's, if he can weather the storm with his family, I think in this case, then probably there aren't any repercussions coming this way.
But he's still an underling.
Right, he still has a big boss.
Yeah, he still has a big boss.
And that hierarchical structure is certainly something that people, I think, live with everywhere to some degree, but certainly in the Chinese state, I think that's particularly important.
What do you guys think about the title?
Beijing Flickers.
I don't really have an answer. I guess in some sense, when I think of flicker, I think of silent movies because that's what they were called back in the early days of cinema. Maybe scenes. The whole movie is just a series of scenes with various characters, and then each particular scene or 5-minute segment or whatever is a flicker unto itself, perhaps. Again, reiterating the city of Beijing and what it does to people.
And then there's the other meaning of flicker, like a candle flickers. The tenuousness of this existence. Because, a candle flame can be blown out just like that, and not that big a deal, right? But another interesting thing to consider is that an earlier film for this director was called Beijing Bastards, and it was about a punk scene in Beijing. So I haven't seen that film, but it's possible that maybe there's some sense in which they understood as companion pieces, but beyond that, I wouldn't be able to speculate more about that.
I was going to say that the flicker, I would combine both of your definitions together, because with one, I think even though the characters are talking, it's not a silent film, it's not something like that, but in itself they are silent because they have that higher power that silences them because of the social justice, or not lack of social justice.
Yeah.
And that they have these moments of, okay, they flame up, they light up when they have the friends together. Like that's their little light of hope. And at the end they said that even when there's dark, or use darkness as your lens.
Right.
So that's when darkness you kind of associate with people going quiet too.
And the main character was, for all practical purposes, for most of the movie, silent film acting. It was all mime and facial expressions, so it worked. I thought it was correct.
And of course, his literal silence sort of stands in for their metaphorical silence.
Yeah.
One thing that I think was very realistic, and as someone who worked and was around the local music industry here in Lubbock for almost 10 years, I've been around a lot of bands. I've been around a lot, seen the inner workings of how a lot of bands work, and read a lot of material about the history of various bands. And what happened when they booted her out, that kind of stuff happens all the time. That was a very realistic portrayal of the way a band would work, and and I think that's still true today.
And isn't it interesting that scene chooses to define that process in terms of democracy?
Yeah,
she said, "I'm all for democracy." Yeah, and democracy can suck sometimes, right? Because you're on a losing end. Yeah.
Is the Big Brother thing traditional? I mean, does that happen when you said, okay, this is my big brother? Mm-hmm. Is that...
That is a little outside my realm of expertise.
I think in China, in Asia, like that term, like Big Brother, like Taija, really like famous, like especially like the underworld thing. Whenever you're doing a business or anything, if you got underworld support, then you're good. So that's in Asia. I don't know that a common thing in the whole world.
I grew up, both my parents were professors, and I grew up my whole life with graduate students from all over the world, from Asia, India, South America, etc. I had a very multicultural upbringing, and I remember some of the Chinese students that would live with us, and they would call me little brother. So yeah, that is traditional. It's a sign of respect and veneration in some ways, and that particular scene where, okay, so he broke the law, he stole the money, but he did it for a good reason. Not that necessarily justifies it, but yet he meets somebody else who's very wealthy and wants to take him under his wing, and just because he showed some kindness by taking him, when he was drunk, back to his house, and he didn't ask for anything from the Big Brother, and therefore the Big Brother gave it to him because it was genuine. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
Which again shows kind of that ambivalence, right, about this whole system and structure. There's light and there's darkness. Right?
Yeah. I was struck by their strength in the middle of all this despair when they could just be down on the bottom. And of course, he was he was suicidal in his way, but they were all so strong in their own way too, and then this real spark. She's still singing at the end. They might have kicked her out, she's still singing. He goes and beats up the band members, even though he gets the worst of it. They dream of taking revenge on the big boss, I guess. And she even goes in front of the office, and his family attacks her boss. Now that's amazing that she would do that, and to me, it seems amazing in that culture. And they all have this deep underlying strength in the middle of all this.
Maybe that's what I found hopeful about it.
I
Optimistic.
like that the dog is called Captain.
Well, he lost his happiness.
Yeah,
and
lost
so
his
really
happiness.
comes back.
What a good way to describe a cat.
Is that also Americanized?
I'm sorry?
Is that also Americanized then? The having the pet dog? Doesn't
No, maybe, perhaps. Not sure. That's a good question. Yeah. That's a good question. It seemed like a very American dog, so
Yeah.
it's like something last.
Right,
Yeah.
Other questions or thoughts or comments?
Just on the disappointing moment in the room was, like I said, his kid with all the gloves. I mean, he was told by the big brother, but I believe it was Chelsea, who remember he was inside his house, bringing him back. He said, he was talking about his other brother, Sunflower, and he said, tell him to hang in there. And then right whenever he said that, like everything black, and then everything started to happen. I mean, that was probably like the only thing, just hang in there. And, that kind of stuff. Would you say that the city is also, like, since it does play the character, going to be considered the antagonist as well?
It's a really good question. Especially given that if that's the central message of the film, just hang in there, right? Because essentially then that performs some very important ideological work for its audience. If indeed the audience is also struggling in this economy and in this social system. That's basically the American dream, right? It's okay if things are going poorly for you right now. You just keep working hard, and everything's going to be okay. Right? So it's interesting that if that truly is the center of this film, that is really interesting.
It's really big since it's on the omnipresence, kind of like God, since everyone's answering to higher one, you can finally do the patient. And since since the director has a problem with the state, I guess he might have a problem with kind of small way.
Yeah, and I love talk about the cinematography, the composition of that shot when they're on the beach.
Yeah.
You know, and even there, you still don't get away from it, right? Because you have the smog, you have those cranes out there in the distance, and it's like it's still there watching.
You know, when I first saw this, I really thought that was where the film was going to end.
I did too.
And it reminded me, there was an artist, I think, in the 90s, Ray Johnson, who his last work of art was driving his car into a lake and, killed himself. And I thought, oh, there's influence here. But no, it isn't. Hopeful that, which is even better, I suppose.
How many of you picked up? So his first word in the film is me. How many of you picked up what that was going to mean at the end?
Can you guess what it would be?
Right. Like what he was talking about.
I actually just put together, like, right when they were in the hospital, like, that's the scene.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it was a nice moment. I like those little setups and deliveries in film.
I'm just amazed that he took it back, or seemingly.
That's his strength.
Yeah.
It just almost felt like everyone was like a slave to somebody else. It felt like everyone was like always not like serving masters. Just like even when they're speaking, like everything, like whenever they felt like a little bit of freedom, all they could do was talk about it. How it felt. Like the snow, it felt like ripping a piece of the contract. Or,
Right.
You know, or like you were finally feeling like freedom. Or his brother, he was with his girlfriend. They just felt like every good moment they just had rooting for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, when they're driving the car and he's hanging out the window. Which felt like a very American film at that
Yeah,
point.
it did.
It sort of felt like one of those, like Garden State or something, one of those disaffected suburban 20-something movies. Which I guess it kind of is, it's just urban.
And we never heard a whole poem, did we?
Was it at the end?
I mean, we heard some lines, but never a full poem. I really like the drag queen character as well. I think that character made the movie much more watchable in a way.
Well, I love his intro
Yeah.
in the hospital room. It's so great. Yeah, I agree with that. It's great. And that's what some of the really, I think, impressive writing in the script is in some of the imagery that evokes, how that relates to the story itself and the city and all that, everything that we're talking about.
Well, talking about immigrants, as you said, in my fatherland,
Motherland.
in my motherland,
Yeah.
this is the way it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for being here. And we'll be here again next Thursday night, 6 p.m. So come on back and join us. Those of you who need a signature, hang around. I'll hand those out. And thanks again to Rob Weiner for coming.